And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge, back once again with another episode on my ongoing weekly segment, Valiant Till the Last, in which I read the entirety of the Valiant comics universe since 2012, one deluxe hardcover edition at a time. And with no further ado, today we are looking at Britannia, the deluxe edition. Quite a few oddities about this particular volume. Firstly, it's a deluxe edition of a series called Britannia. It's important to note that Britannia is in no way related to anything else in the Valiant universe that I have as yet read. That means it has nothing to do with Harbinger, nothing to do with Exo Manowar, nothing to do with Ninjak, and nothing to do with Bloodshot. It has nothing to do with any of those things at all. I'll talk about the storyline in a bit and possibly what it's about to an extent, or where it might fit in the future, but for now I just want to make that clear. As far as I'm concerned, this is utterly out of continuity, and the first out of continuity Valiant story that I read. So let's get into it. We have the cover here, Britannia, Roman Centurion here, the usual details. The spine is a clean white spine in the dust jacket, which is indicative of later era Valiant. This is actually the first Valiant Deluxe edition that ever had a white spine, and I think it came out just before the DMG takeover in 2018, so that's a little bit unusual. In terms of the back, we've got this, History's First Detective. Remember that blurb is going to be important later. Then we've got the usual blurb on the back. Inside flaps, we're looking at absolutely standard, kind of an off-white cream. We've got the intro front blurb, and we've got the rear blurb with the creators in there as well. Peter Milligan, Juan Jose Raip, I think as that's pronounced, and Robert Gill. So let's get the dust jacket off and let's look under the cover. Right, we've got a nice simple buckram. We've got Britannia in the same stylized logo as the dust jacket, but we've got that embossed on in, as you can see, it's like a dull foil, but it is a foil and it is an emboss, so you can actually feel it. Even if you close your eyes, you can feel it as the stamp that's gone in there. Nice clean spine, nice clean back. So the spine will line up with all your other Valiants, or most of the Valiants on the shelf, if you want to have it raw on the shelf. I know some people do, that's not for me. So let's jump into it itself. Right, so Britannia actually isn't a limited maxi series, which is what I originally thought. What it actually is 3 mini-series. So firstly there is Britannia, issues 1 to 4. Can we see this? We can see this. Britannia 1 to 4. Then we have We Who Are About to Die, which is Britannia 1 to 4 again, but with that subtitle. And then we have a third miniseries that came out subsequently called Britannia Lost Eagles of Rome, 1 to 4. So overall you have 12 issues, which is the same as a maxi series, but it's actually 3 miniseries. It's collected here in the correct chronological order, and then it ends with some technical essays by Dr. Karen Kleiber-Hursk and Dr. John Colston. Actual doctors and actual academics. We'll talk about that in a second. So, this is it. What is the story? Let's zoom in. Here we are. Right, what is the story? Right, so the main character is a guy called Antonius. What's his surname? Antonius Axia is his name. He's basically a member of the Roman legions. Here we have the usual Valiant setup with the 4 covers. And yeah, artwork is solid, writing is solid. What's it about? This guy is a Roman legion, or a member of the Roman legions, who basically goes through some various kind of like traumas and then essentially decides or gets sculpted into a detective. So the world's first detective. Now, a lot of people do say, or have said online, oh, you know, he's sort of like Batman, he's like the world's greatest detective. Yeah, no. He's not like Batman at all. He's like Sherlock, but he's like a shit version of Sherlock. That still means he's the best detective in the world, because he is literally the only detective in the world. But all it is he's a detective. And what the story does a quite good job of showing is that at this time in the Roman area, this is the 1st century AD, so the reign of Emperor Nero, subsequent to Emperor Claudius, what we have is a very superstitious time where everyone believes in gods and portents and symbols, and this guy, Antonius Axia, has essentially learnt to think rationally and reasonably. And as such, it's like he's got a superpower amongst other men. He can look at things and be like, oh, well, this happened because of this and this. Or I look at these cuts on a dead body and I can see that it's caused by a sword and not by an animal, and that sort of thing. Really obvious stuff, but he is alone in being able to do this in the era in which he lives. And that really is the core premise of the entire story. He is going around as like a slightly rubbish Sherlock Holmes. Don't take that as a criticism. Compared to the rest of the story and within keeping of the rest of it, he is basically, you know, leagues ahead of everyone else, much smarter than everyone else, and definitely sort of a man out of time in that sense, in that he thinks and views the world in a way unlike all his contemporaries. So he's definitely still the world's first detective, or as they call it here, detectioneer, which I guess is kind of a Imperial Roman version of the word detective, like detectioneer, which is a cool way of doing it. Anyway, the first arc is decent and really sets the scene and gives you a feel for like who he is and how the setup of his sort of, for want of a better term, abilities. Then it moves into the second arc, We Who Are About to Die, which is set a little while later. Introduces a really cool character that I really liked in this. You'll see in just a second. Decent story, good depiction of like Imperial stuff. The one thing that I will say, this is the character. Fucking badass, great character. Would love to have seen a limited miniseries of her and her stuff, but we haven't got one yet. What was I going to say? Yeah, so overall this is like a good story. It's very much in keeping with its basic premise of being in the Roman era. In other words, what you have are Romans, you have obviously the Britons. When they go to Britain, they have references of Gaul. You have lots of talks of gods like Apollo and Zeus and that sort of stuff. Nothing in this at all intersects with the Valiant universe, which I was a bit surprised by, like I said at the beginning, because I'd expect there at least to be a cameo from someone like the Eternal Warrior, who's obviously been around for thousands and thousands of years, but none of that at all. One thing that does happen quite a bit in this story is that it does involve supernatural stuff, and as I mentioned in many of my videos, I'm not a fan of supernatural stories. I'm generally, when it comes to sort of magic and sorcery, I'm very meh, not really interested in it. So this has got a bit of that. That said, it does it in a way which is very palatable and that I enjoyed reading, so I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was done reasonably well. It wasn't too in my face. Generally speaking, what happens is Antonius deconstructs it. He's like, aha, this isn't magic, this is the following thing, which was kind of cool and I enjoyed. That's a personal thing. If you're a massive fan of magic and sword and sorcery stories, maybe you won't like that he deconstructs it in that way. What I will say is I was expecting, as well as expecting to see the Eternal Warrior turn up at some point, I was expecting this to intersect with the dead side. Now, for those of you that don't know, and I don't know much about it either, the dead side is like the magic underworld voodoo side of the Valiant universe. I haven't got to the Shadow Man comics yet, so I know very little about it. I have read a little bit of Dr. Mirage, as she's cameoed in various of the comics like Faith, and so I am aware there is a dead side with ghosts and demons and monsters and that sort of thing. I thought it was going to intersect with this, because once I was reading this and I was like, oh, there's a lot of magic and sword and sorcery, I bet it intersects with Valiant Dead Side. It doesn't. So literally in no way, there's no Eternal Warrior, there's no Valiant Dead Side as far as I can tell. This is very much a case of this is a standalone story. So that's the second arc, which introduces this character. I forget her name because I'm rubbish, but she's really cool. And then we have the third arc, Lost Eagles of Rome. Achillea, that's her name, Achillea, like Achilles, but I guess the feminized version of it. She is really cool. So Lost Eagles of Rome is like the third and last miniseries of 4 issues. And again, you've got some sort of magic related kind of stuff. Nothing to do with the Valiant universe. You've got nothing else to do with the Valiant universe. You've got the climax or the final arc of this self-contained story. And it is decent. One thing I did get slightly annoyed about for this arc was the artwork, specifically the colouring. So this is Achillea, who is the character we just saw here, who I really like, who is evidently a person of colour, whereas here what they've done is they've kind of like lightened his skin, lightened her hair substantially, and they've done that kind of throughout the rest of this miniseries. I wasn't a fan of it. I mean, you know, I'm not saying you have to have diversity for diversity's sake, etc., etc., but the thing is, if you have a character who's black, then deliberately skin lightening them and hair lightening them just seems stupid. I don't understand the rationale for that. It's a bit of a tonal misstep, but ignoring that to one side, story itself was decent, and was interesting and was fun. I did enjoy reading it. Like I say, I would love to see a spin-off miniseries of Achillea, because she's a total badass. There she is. And the storyline was interesting and well worth a read. Would I have bought this if it wasn't in the Valiant universe? Probably not. If I just read this as a comic released by some other publisher and it was just a standalone 12-issue series, I would have read it, I would have enjoyed it, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. I'll be totally honest with you. Having said that, it's in my collection now. I'm not going to sell it and get rid of it because obviously I own all the Valiant Deluxes and I'm not getting rid of them as yet. So yeah, it's definitely an okay read. It's a decent read. Here are the essays I mentioned at the end. So these are technical academic essays written by a bunch of history professors, basically, genuinely. Like, these are nothing to do with the Valiant story. These are genuine historical retrospectives of how accurate is a story, who was Nero, who were the Vestal Virgins, what is the truth about gladiators. Like, genuinely, it's like having a lesson in Latin and classics, which is interesting if you're into that sort of stuff. I read through some of it and then I got a bit bored because it's academic literature, but kind of shows what the story is grounded in. And then we have the gallery. Standard gallery sketches, not a script breakdown per se, just a lot of pencil sketches, but the artwork is pretty cool. And that, ladies, gentlemen and others, that is the end of it. That was the gallery edition. Sorry, the gallery part of the deluxe edition. Cool. So, I read this just after having read Ninjak and finishing all the Ninjak thread of comics. I wasn't sure where Britannia fitted in. I thought it might have been out of continuity, but at the same time, I'll be honest, I had a little bit of ego. I was like, I bet if I read this, I'll find some clever little connection to the Eternal Warrior or something else that no one else has, and I'll realise where this fits into the Valiant universe. That's not the case. I didn't realise anything. This doesn't fit in the Valiant universe. This is a total standalone, self-contained hardcover. If you're buying the Valiant Deluxe Edition hardcovers, as far as I'm aware right now, you could get away with not owning this and you would not notice. You can get away with not reading this and you would not notice. Of course, I'm going to be reading more of my collection and the rest of the comics to go. I think I'm over halfway through now, and it might turn out that later on I do find out there is a connection. It feels odd that there isn't, given that in Exo Manowar, Arik is a Visigoth, and in fact there's even like one story, one of the later Exo Manowars, where he goes back in time and kills a Roman legionary. So I was kind of like, surely this will have some intersection with Arik and time travel or the dead side or something, but it genuinely did not. This was entirely out of canon as far as I'm aware. If I find out later it does intersect with something, of course I will say it in a later video and I'll let you know. But for now, on that map that I'm building, this is way over on one side, all the way by itself over here in the corner. Okay, right, hope that was useful, guys. It definitely would have been useful to me had I seen a review like that before I read this. What am I doing next? So next, I've decided to dive into something which I know for a fact is linked to the Valiant universe. I've been quite excited and quite keen on it for a while, but I've been forcing myself to hold off. I am going to read Rai. That's R-A-I, Rai, the deluxe edition, which I'm really keen to read. I know it's set like thousands of years in the future and stuff, and in lots of ways, lots of people have talked about how it is kind of like the ultimate crescendo or climax for a lot of the Valiant stories and Valiant arcs that I've read so far. So I'm really keen to read that. Next week we'll be reading Rai. It's tough to get hold of the deluxe edition, but feel free to read along in singles, digital, or in trades if you can. And I'll catch you on the next video. Alright, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at @IamThomasJudge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.